Hi, everyone, and welcome to our new podcast, That's So Auburn. I'm Auburn's Mayor, Nancy Backus, and I am honored that you chose to listen in today. I'm hoping by now you've figured out what this podcast is going to be about. It's going to be about all things Auburn, the city that I love, and I hope to help you love it too. First, let me clarify a couple of things for you. One, we are talking about the city of Auburn in the state of Washington. We're located almost exactly between Seattle to our north and Tacoma to our south. We're lucky to live in the shadow of the majestic Mount Rainier and are one of the few cities in our state that sits within two counties, King County and Pierce County. We also share our land with the Muckleshoot Indian tribe. And two, and this is really important, I believe that our city is home to some of the best people in the world. I know that we can always do better, but I always believe that we are doing better than most and hope you'll listen in with open hearts and open minds. And when you hear That's So Auburn, it fills you with pride for our city. So without further delay, let's get started with our very first episode of That's So Auburn. In our first podcast, I wanted to share with you how the city of Auburn is addressing homelessness. I know this is something that we're all very concerned about, and it has become the most asked issue I hear about. One thing that really does bother me, though, is when someone says, "You're not doing anything." So today, I want to bring to light the numerous things we are doing and have been doing for quite a while, and what we plan on doing in the future. I will be joined today by Kent Hay. He is our Homelessness Outreach Administrator. You will be impressed, because I know I am, with what he is able to do, and probably frustrated, I know I am, when you hear about the barriers he faces as he works to bring people inside. And it's probably not what you think it might be. So before we bring in Kent, I want to share with you Auburn's philosophy on addressing homelessness in our community. It's important that we start here so that there is no question about what our goals are and how we expect to achieve them when it comes to addressing this crisis. So number one, the city of Auburn does not believe that leaving people on the streets is safe for them or anyone of our community. Two, the city of Auburn has resources and services for those people that are experiencing homelessness, and we're doing everything in our power to move those people into services and housing. Number three, the Washington State Legislature and the Washington State Supreme Court have passed laws and handed down rulings that prevent us from doing things we know would help some of those individuals who are experiencing homelessness. We believe these things are keeping people on the streets much longer than they could be or should be, and these people are suffering longer than they have to because of it. And number four, we believe that it is harmful to the persons on the street to live in unhealthy, dangerous, and unsanitary conditions, yet our efforts to move people from encampments and cleanup of the hazardous waste in them is obstructed, as evidenced by the previous item that I was mentioning in number three. I'm going to continue to work to bring people off of our streets, and I need you to help us. Please contact your representatives in Olympia and demand change. Now, let's hear from the real Auburn expert on homelessness in our community, Mr. Kent Hay. Hello, Kent. Welcome to Auburn's very first podcast. We've talked about this for a long time. Thanks so much for being here with me today.
Yes, Mayor. Thanks for having me. I definitely appreciate the work that's gone into this, and hope we can shed some light on addressing homelessness in Auburn.
Well, I know you and I chat on a regular basis, and I just think it's important that people in our community hear some of the challenges that you're facing. But before we get to that, Kent, I said you're an expert in the field and in this area, and I want people to understand what your background is. Can you share a little bit about how you got to this point in your career?
Yeah, so definitely this was something that I'm not sure that I thought I'd be doing, but my work experiences led me down this path. But I started off doing group home work. From group home, jumped into working as an instructional assistant at a school in Edmonds. And from there, I went to Valley Cities. So I worked at Valley Cities with families and children, addressing behaviors at school and at home. And then Overlake Hospital, where I worked there with behavioral kids in their behavioral school and also in the psych department. And from there, I went to Monroe Prison as a mental health counselor. So I worked there for a few years, doing mental health work in their not the special offenders unit, but when I first got there, they opened a new prison that dealt with the needs of inmates who were experiencing mental health issues. Also from there, went to working as a probation counselor at Seattle Municipal Court, where I was a mental health probation counselor. For some time, I left there, ended up going back to California, where I'm originally from, and started working as a CPS worker there, and did some other jobs with developmentally disabled folks. Came back to Washington, started working at King County District Court, touching everything from domestic violence to mental health and everything in between, DUI. And then ended up going back to Seattle Municipal Court, where I was hired in the DV unit, but from there I helped build the resource center. I was also involved in community court and keeping that going, as well as pre-child diversion and everything, and working with women who were in the prostitution field. Left there and went to Redmond, where this kind of work started to happen. So I was hired in Redmond, and it was a 6-month project to address their homelessness issues there, and I helped build their program there, and it was pretty successful. We started a community court in the Redmond Library. I did the outreach there, helped pass some ordinances, and today it still keeps going. And I found myself in Auburn, and so that's where I'm at now, and helping build the outreach program here and addressing the homelessness issues out here in Auburn. So yeah, it's been a 20-plus year run in the social service and criminal justice field.
So you've had a lot of experience. I will tell you that I was afraid to talk with Redmond Mayor Angela Burney after you chose to come to Auburn. I was afraid she would make me persona non grata for bringing you into Auburn, because I know how much she valued your work in Redmond. But I'm happy to say that we are still friends, and the work continues in Redmond. A lot of people probably don't think there is much homelessness on the east side, that it's more Seattle and South King County, but there is no city that is unscathed from community members who are experiencing homelessness. So thanks, Kent, for joining me today, and let's jump right into it. I'm going to ask you some questions, Kent, to kind of just get us started on this. I'm sure it'll probably end up like the conversations in my office when you come in after a long day out in the encampments. But let's start with some of the basics. First question, what is the state of homelessness in Auburn right now? You're out in the encampments. What are the biggest issues that you're seeing in the encampments, on the streets? Even things like the demographics of the people that you're working with.
Yeah, and so number-wise, as I try to wrap up, the numbers for last year, I think we're in the range of probably 150 to 200 people. I would say more. The hard part, the people coming and going. So it's not just. There's been folks who've been homeless in Auburn for a long time, but there's an influx of people from different cities, different counties, different states, who either, arrive here on the bus or just leave a different city to come and never leave. people looking for better opportunities, people that move here for family issues and then end up the family not getting together and then they end up homeless here in Auburn. So the majority of our population are white males that are homeless, and then women following that, and then that's and also more of our older population. So we have a huge older homeless population in Auburn, which is definitely difficult to address. I don't think folks who are seniors should be experiencing homelessness, but those are the numbers those are the folks that we're pretty much looking at that's in our shelter and on our streets.
So, wide variety of individuals who you're working with. I agree with you, Kent. First of all, no one should be outside, but seniors in our community, veterans in our community, we could and should be doing better than what we're seeing out there right now. People who have served our country, people who have had solid careers, people who are down on their luck for whatever reason. And we know that there is no one reason that individuals come into homelessness.
Definitely.
Right? You might be able to kind of lump groups together based on mental health, drug, substance use disorder, they lost their job, even young people aging out of the foster care system. We don't think about that all the time. We think of foster care and then they become these great young adults because they've had a wonderful experience. We know that's not the case. How do you work with these individuals? Tell me about how do you first approach someone? I mean, when you first got to Auburn, we didn't even know that there were people way back in the trees, in the bushes. You did. It feels like you knew exactly where to go. So how do you interact with someone when you first meet them?
Yeah, the difficult part here in Auburn, when I first got here and was trying to figure out where to start, I started here at Brandon Park because I felt like that was my ground zero. There always has to be a ground zero for me to start and then spread out. And what I found, which was frustrating, is when I got here and I started making contact with people who were in tents or by the river, was I'd introduce myself and tell them I was the outreach worker, and the first thing that people would say is, what can you give me, for the most part, right? It's, do you have food, or do you have a blanket, or do you have a tent, or can you give me a gift card, or whatever it was, right? And so really my conversation was, well, I don't have any of that stuff, but I can help you get out of this situation, and that's what I'm offering. So a lot of people didn't want to take that because, what a lot of people are used to, again, was people coming up and saying, can I give you something, right? How can I help you by giving you something? Mm-hmm. And I really wasn't trying to help people get out of their situation. It was more accommodating to what they were doing out there on the river and in the park.
It's kind of enabling them to stay where they are. And I know, we'll get into more of this, but it's just like seeing individuals at the off-ramps asking for money.
Definitely.
We as a community are upset, we're concerned, sometimes angered by seeing people out in the community, either substance use disorder, mental health challenges. They're standing there asking for money. We get angry because they're in our community doing that. But what is the easiest thing for us to do to make us feel better for that moment is to roll down the window and hand them $1, hand them the change out of the ashtray, hand them a $5, hand them a $20. And what we're doing is enabling that to continue instead of the services that everyone's tax dollars are going to provide. And it's not perfect. I'm not saying that every tax dollar is used in the very best way possible, but it's better than allowing someone to continue to stay outside by giving them money to to support either their addiction or to stay outside. It's not right.
Yeah. And usually what I tell people when this, I try not to address those issues when people call, and I know people might don't want to hear this, but panhandling is not a homelessness issue. That's a community issue. And, if people didn't give, then people wouldn't do that. You're creating business jobs for people, and then and expecting them to change in a way that you would like to see them change. I tell people it's kind of the equivalent of buying happiness. So you drive down the street, or you drive down the freeway, and you get off at the off ramp or the stop sign, and you choose which person looks the more needy, and then you dig in your pocket and you give them money, and you just created a job for that person. And so when you see them day after day after day in the same spot, and you're wondering why, it's because they make a lot of money doing that. And it's kind of like Lyft or Uber, right? I can work whenever I want to work, or not work when I don't want to work, and so it's a business. You created a job for someone. And the sad part about it is, for folks who maybe can't get behind the social service part of it, as a taxpayer, I live in Auburn. We're being taxed to pay for services, and then at the same time, even if you don't want to pay for it, you're paying for the services. But then you go in your pocket and you give people money, and what you're telling them is not to take the services that you're already paying for. You're really telling them to just stay put and don't get help, and you're double dipping.
Yeah, we even put up a few signs in the city that say, please keep your change, give to your favorite nonprofit. I received a couple of pieces of hate email for doing that. Not people that live in our city, but I was called a monster. How dare you tell someone not to give money? And they said, I will tell you, I will continue to do this, even more so because you said not to. I don't want everyone to think people in the state of Washington are monsters like you are. Well, I will always accept criticism and try and consider the validity of their criticism and how can I be better. But I refuse to accept this one because we are trying to help people in our community. We've talked about this numerous times. The three decisions, or the three things that I try and utilize, and that you and I kind of created to make decisions in the city of Auburn, are compassion. Always have a little bit of compassion. Accountability. I believe there needs to be accountability for everyone involved in the situation. And community. There needs to be community accountability. And if you're in the city of Auburn, I believe you are part of our community, regardless of whether you have the most elegant of homes or the stars are your ceiling at night. You are a member of this community. And because of that, there is an expectation of each of us that we take care of one another. Everybody is going to be able to do this at differing levels, but we take care of one another. That is an expectation of community. And I'm not going to tell an individual who you're working with that they're less than and they don't need to be accountable or be part of the community. Mm-hmm. So let's talk a little bit about that. What things can the community do to help get people inside?
Yeah, on that panhandling side and the giving side, just one thing to mention is, I can go out and offer housing options or services, or because what I do, when I go out is I have my computer, I have my Wi-Fi hotspot, have my backpack, table, chair in the back of my car, and I definitely go to places and pull out my stuff and start servicing people with everything that's in my repertoire. But there's nothing that I can offer that's better than the cash that people are giving in that moment. Homelessness is instant gratification, right? I know people don't want to hear that, but
How do you mean by, what do you mean by that, Kent?
so usually people say people are just trying to meet their needs, right? Get their needs met, the basic needs. A lot of what you see out there, though, is instant gratification. It's the money, right? It's the $20 real quick so I can, whatever I need to do with it, right? Go get my fix, or I have to pay somebody back, or whatever it is, right, that you're hustling for. So it's what can I get right now? So there's no long game being played. It's a short game. It's what can I do right now to meet my immediate need. And it's not always so I can stay out of the cold or get some socks or something like that. I think we want to believe that. But that's rare that you see someone out there panhandling to go into the store and buy some socks and some pants and some shoes or save enough for a hotel. It's more really of whatever that, again, fix is, or paying someone back because they're scared of what's the repercussions of something. But there's no planning of how can I get out of this situation. It's just more planning of how can I meet my needs right now.
And what you're offering is more of that long-term strategy.
It is.
I know when you and I first talked, when we met 3 or 4 years ago, when you were up in Redmond, and you said everyone that you meet and you work with has a plan. You put a plan in place, and even if you don't see that person for a few months, that plan is still in existence whenever you're in contact with them again. Mm-hmm. You're still working on getting that housing voucher or getting their Social Security benefits. You are amazing the way that you are able to connect with agencies, and even you struggle with getting through sometimes. So imagine someone who has been outside, who's chronically homeless. They have their own challenges, their own crises that they're going through. It's almost impossible. The system is challenging. And you talk about the challenges that you face out there every day. So what do you see as some of the biggest hurdles that you face on both sides, right? Through the agencies, through the nonprofits, or the individuals that you're working with and for?
Yeah, I would, it's challenging. I would say that I don't think the system is set up to be easy, to make it easy to get through. I honestly believe that the system is set up to, that it screens people out. Because if you just think about some of the agencies where you call and you're on hold for 3-4 hours, there are people who don't have minutes on their phone, especially if you have, a state phone and you only have a certain amount of minutes, or your battery runs out and you don't have a place to plug in, or you have a phone where it's Wi-Fi only, and where do you go for Wi-Fi, and you're at a choppy place, and so that makes it difficult, especially with COVID right now. Places not being open, you can't just walk in and meet with someone and get things done really quick. I'll just tell you a situation today that's very frustrating. Is I have a young man who's disabled. His mom is currently in the hospital. He is 31, has never had a Washington State ID in his whole life. You can't schedule an appointment to go to the Social Security office to get your Social Security card, because in order to get your ID, you need proof of documents. And so we were able to get his birth certificate. We were able to get his school transcripts. We sent those in hoping that would be enough. They sent it back and said it wasn't enough information for him to get his ID. So we called today, and there's really no way around it, right? And so in order to get him in housing, getting him on hand, getting him a housing essential needs voucher, which we've done, he's qualified, and we got to make the call to get into the appointment. Even if he gets that, he has no ID, so we still can't get him into housing. So he can't get the documents because he's never had an ID before, ever. And Social Security won't take what we're giving. So he's stuck in the shelter, until we can figure something out, and that's the tricky part. You got someone who's developmentally disabled trying to navigate hearing no and then trying to think about what to do to get out of the situation, but doesn't have the ability to ask the right questions or figure this out. And so that's difficult. You know, that's a tough one.
And so when you're challenged by trying to accomplish what you've set out to accomplish, we know that there are some real struggles and roadblocks, obstacles in the system in order to be able to do what everybody says they want to do, which is to house individuals, to get them off the streets, out of the encampments, because we agree people deserve to be inside. I know there's a whole nother podcast that we can go through on the challenges of bringing someone inside, and let's commit to doing that as our next topic, because I know it'll take way too long today. But there are, before we finish up today, let's try and end this on something of a positive. Share a little bit about the successes that you have had, and what are some of where are we showing successes right now? I know you've been able to get a lot of people into housing. Talk a little bit about that, and then what are you seeing in Auburn that, I know you don't like hope. Hope is just doing something without having a plan.
Yes. Hope is, the definition for me of hope is definitely a wish, you know, without execution for the most part. So it's hope is just is wishing without a plan, definitely.
So tell me what successes you've had, and tell me what is in place and what's the plan moving forward.
Yeah, we housed last year around 34 people. And, you know, I know in the scope of things, you look at that and you're like, it's not a huge number, but the amount of work it takes for one person, the phone calls, the paperwork, the appointments that need to be made, the finding people out in the encampments to get to the appointments. I mean, just there's a lot of work that goes into that. And so I'm trying to think what would be the biggest one. I think every time someone gets housed, it's great for them. I always tell people, you know, I don't, everybody's success and failures are their own, and so I don't take that away from anybody. And so when they get housed, I'm very happy for them. It's not what I did; it's more of they put the work in, and you know, and they were able to get in. And a big shout out to Pastor Josh for the help with the furniture once people get housed. But the hard part, you know, it's great to house the people. The hard part is there's the follow-up part, right? And I think that's a lot what we forget is still having to make sure you make contact with people to reinforce being inside instead of wanting to go back outside. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, it took a while for me to realize after we had started talking about it, but once someone has been outside for any significant length of time, we would naturally assume that they would just jump at the opportunity to be inside. But that's not true, because there is trauma involved with coming in.
Definitely.
So I know that it takes a while for you to be able to get someone into housing, but you've been incredibly successful. But let's talk just a little bit about some of the things that have been put in place. We have the Ray of Hope Day Center. We have the Sundown Overnight Shelter. We have Debbie Christian, who I always say is an angel on earth for the work that she does. But also Community Court. You have been instrumental in making sure that Community Court got off the ground and is operational, and the resource center for the entire community that goes along with that.
Yeah. And before I jump into that, I just thought of one. That is a great example of someone being able to get into housing. A fella at the Ray of Hope. When I first met, he's been out there. I don't know how long he's been homeless there, and been working at the food bank in the Ray of Hope. And he never thought he would get into housing, ever again. You know, he's had multiple heart attacks and had some medical issues, and has been living in his car. And he finally got housed right before Christmas. And so for him, you know, he cried. I mean, this is a man in his 60s who just never thought he'd ever be inside again. And so that's a great one. But when it comes to, the community court is going well. The resource center is what I run. So in order to get our community court up and running, I had to become the court coordinator for a while to get everything happening and doing the assessments and getting the resource center started and bringing in all the providers. And we have a virtual resource center that's both in person and virtual, and we have a good amount of providers that show up, DSHS and Walk to Freedom and, Orion Industries, and to name a few. And so it's been going well. We just got a new phone agency that's going to come in and do our phones for us once a week, twice a month, which is great. And so, with the one-stop shop coming, partnering with We Care Clinic to do our methadone and Health Point and we do outreach and, just bringing all the partners together, and especially have everything in one place to provide services for those people who are willing to go into the shelter. Even the people who aren't willing to go into the shelter still show up to the resource center, and whether it's a Thursday, they'll show up. If it's not a Thursday, they'll still show up, hoping that I'm in there. And so it's going well over there.
I think what you have proven, Kent, is that you don't give up on people, right? I know that when you first started, a lot of people didn't trust you, but what you told them is, I'll be back. And when you said you'd be back, you showed up. And so you've established trust with them and a relationship, not a friendship, but a relationship to where they're seeking you out. And I think that is a huge compliment to the work that you're doing. Again, we could go on and on and on, and we will, because we're going to have numerous episodes of this podcast surrounding homelessness and the challenges through the legal system as well as through legislation. But maybe that's a good place to stop today on a positive note, is just that when you said you would be there, you were there, whether they were or not. And you left your card to let them know that you were there. When you said you would drive them somewhere for an appointment, you were there to drive them for an appointment. You show up every day as a very genuine person who truly cares about this community. And I am very thankful that you are part of our team. So do you have any final thoughts, anything you'd like to share with us today, Kent?
Yeah, I used to, when I first started doing this, when people would ask me about homelessness, I would tell people, we made people comfortable in homelessness, or people were comfortable. And so homelessness is always evolving and changing, and you have to change with it. And of course I changed with it to meet the needs, but also changed my opinion in some things. And I would tell you that homelessness is familiar. It's not comfortable, it's familiar. So people do what's familiar. So, so when you talk about people, being comfortable with me and allowing me to, when I walk into the encampments and stuff, I'm familiar now. They're not necessarily comfortable with me, but I'm familiar and they know who I am and they've heard my name. And so that's part of homelessness now is, it's a familiarity. It's not, I'm familiar to everybody. And so it opens the door to be able to help more people.
Well, I think you've opened a lot of doors today, a lot of minds to think about the work that you do, your tireless efforts on behalf of the community, and I look forward to continuing this discussion in future podcasts of That's So Auburn, and thank you all for joining us today.